Alright, dude, I gotta get the receipt.
Why would you announce it?
Okay, here we go again. What's up, everybody? This is Brenton from Forza Tuning and Performance, and today we got another question to answer for you, but this is going to be a little bit different than normal. So most of the time we get the normal questions that come in, and they're pretty much like short answer questions where I can answer them pretty quickly. I've got a lot of requests for things along the lines of how did I get into this business, what is my background in this industry, how did I get started, how did Forza come to be? If you're a younger guy wanting to get into this field, do you have any suggestions on how you can get started? So I'll just be honest with you, I'm not too big on talking about myself, so this is not something that I would just regularly put out there, but I've got a bunch of requests for it. So I'm going to answer these questions, and we might break this up in a couple series. I don't want to get too long-winded here. I'm just going to start off by how did I get started in this industry, or how did I get into cars? My dad was not really into cars too much. My dad is very mechanical in nature, but really he wasn't passionate about cars. He liked them, but it wasn't a big deal. So from a young age, I'm not really sure why, but cars always fascinated me. Anything mechanical, really. So I was the kid that was taking stuff apart, taking electronics apart. So it probably stemmed from that originally. I was really into Hot Wheels, and they had these things when I was a kid, like micro machines, or these little cars. A lot of y'all are probably too young to know what those are. I don't think they've been around for a long time. But those were my favorite toy of all time, and literally to this day I still have my collection of micro machines, believe it or not. So cars always had a big impact on me for whatever reason. And my dad would take us to, me and my brother, to car shows and to monster truck shows and anything like that. And that probably got it started. Cars were always, a big deal to me from, at a young age. And, I would always, I would go to the magazine section when I was old enough to read. And I would look at the road and track magazines and anything that had to do with, anything, especially exotic cars, but really anything car related. And, my mom and dad would buy the magazines for me, and I would take them home and read them and study them. So from a very young age, cars interest me. I was really intrigued by anything mechanical from a very young age. I was the kid that I took my dad's lawnmower apart, and got my ass spanked for it, which I should have, The next day, I was able to put my dad's lawnmower back together, and it worked. So, from that point on, my dad, really wasn't as mad about it. He could see that I had probably a knack for taking things apart, putting them back together. I would work on all the kids' go-karts, and I would figure out how to bypass the governors and make them faster, and mini bikes, and anything with an engine. That always intrigued me. I wanted to take it apart, understand how it worked, see if I could improve it, make it faster, whatnot. That pretty much carried on all through my adolescence and growing up, and then obviously when I got into my teenage years, I was super infatuated with cars. I probably should have paid more attention at school, but I was too busy, paying attention to car stuff. And, so my dad, he was the type that was like, hey, when you turn 16, I'm not gonna buy you a car. If you want a car, you can get a job, you can work, you can buy your own car. And I'm glad he did that. That instilled a very strong sense of work ethic at a very young age. I worked a lot when I was younger. When I was 12, my dad allowed me to start cutting grass in the neighborhood. He gave me a ride up to Sam's Club, and I took some money I had saved up and bought a lawnmower. And my mom helped me with some little flyers, a little cartoon character, pushing a lawnmower. My mom's real artistic, and I would go around the neighborhood passing these out. And I would cut grass day and night. And by the time I was 16 years old, I had probably $17,000 saved up, to buy a car. When I was younger, lowriders were really big. I'm 40, so lowriders were the thing. So Lowrider magazine and stereos and hydraulics. So I was very involved in that. I didn't have money to pay people to do this stuff, but I wanted it. So out of necessity, I had to learn how it worked. I had to install my own stereos, build all that stuff, learn how hydraulics worked on cars, learn how to weld. And so I started doing that as a teenager, and it kind of grew from there, really. I dated a girl, and her dad was a pipe fitter, and I wanted to learn how to weld really bad. So I kept hounding him, and he taught me how to weld. And he would bring metal home, and I would sit there incessantly and weld, for hours, trying to get better and better. And her brother was into cars. He was older, and he had some friends that were into cars, and so they knew a lot more than I did. So I would, latch onto that, get them to teach me anything that they could. So basically I was doing whatever I could to learn as much about cars as I possibly could. I kept on doing that, and any avenue that I had to go through, or any relationship, whatever I had to do to get some knowledge off somebody, that's what I would do. When I was 17, I bought a 64 Impala because that was like the lowrider to have. And that's when I started doing a frame off restoration on it, and that took a few years, but I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I would read books, and I took the car apart and started restoring it piece by piece. And years later, that I would take it to car shows, and it won a lot of trophies and everything. Even during this time, I actually worked for, I worked like at a warehouse. I worked for my dad. My dad owned a business. It was like an industrial wholesale, supply place. And he had an extra garage bay that was basically just filled with shit. And, I asked him, I said, hey, if I clean this out, can I work on cars here and stuff like that? And he let me. And so I would build cars there, and I would work on other people's cars and so on and so forth. And I would do engines, and I taught myself how to do automatic transmissions and differentials, and basically every component of a car. I mastered the, how it worked, how to rebuild it, anything like that, piece by piece, one piece at a time. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was one of those kids where I always joke with the guys at the shop, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But, I really didn't. And I tried going to college for a semester. Totally miserable, couldn't stand it. It's hard for me to sit still. I want to be working with my hands. I got to where I was basically a teenager, and I was out of high school, and I liked cars, but I really wasn't sure if I wanted to work on cars for a living. I didn't want to get burnt out on it. I just really didn't have a direction that I wanted to go. At some point, I decided that I was going to give it a shot to try to work on cars and just see if I liked it. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And, so there was a specific shop there that was a Corvette specialty shop. And what's unique about this shop is it had a big impact on my life from a very early age. My mom had a twin sister. They were very, very close. So we would go to their house numerous times during a week. And I grew up like this. So on the way to their house, this Corvette specialty shop would be on the way to their house. And so I would see it every single time we went over there. And as a kid, I didn't really know what it was exactly, but they would pull all the cars out front of the shop. So there'd be a bunch of Corvettes and fancy cars out front. So that caught my attention. But as a kid, I didn't know exactly what it was. They had they took like a mid-70s Corvette, and they cut it in half from front to back, and they hung half the car up on the side of the building. And during Christmas time, they would have the Corvette pulling a sleigh with Santa Claus driving the Corvette and stuff. So I would stare at this incessantly growing up. And it wasn't until I got to a teenager that I understand what it was. It was a Corvette specialty shop that did repair and performance stuff on Corvettes and GM vehicles, but they specialized in Corvettes. As I got older, I learned that they had a stellar reputation. They were very, very well known, by far the best in the city. I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to work on cars, but I was sure I wanted to give it a shot. But I wanted to work specifically at this place. I tried to make some relationships and try to get a way into this place, but I really didn't have anything concrete. One Friday, I asked my dad if I could take off early, and I told him, I wanted to go fill out an application to this place. He said, of course, go ahead. So I'd probably leave maybe 3:30, and I drive across town, I go to this place. And I walk in, and I'm a teenager at the time, and I've got a fair amount of experience. But grown up, who's a seasoned veteran in the car place, and especially at a well-known established shop, they're probably not going to take a kid that was my age very seriously, and they didn't. And so I walked in, I said, hey, I want a job here. Can I fill out an application? And, they said they're not hiring, and I kept, well, can I fill out an application? So they agreed to. And so I filled it out and turned it in, and obviously I didn't expect to get hired, and of course I didn't on this first attempt. So what I did is I've always been very, very persistent. So I would take off every Friday a little bit early, and I would drive out there, and I'd walk in the door, and hey, I was following up. I left an application. They tell me they're not hiring, so I was like, can I fill out another application? And you know, the first couple times they looked at me like I was an idiot, you know, and probably to pacify me and get me out of there, they gave me an application, let me fill it out again. So just to prove a point that I was serious about working there, to me it was worth it driving across town to try to prove that I wasn't just, you know, had this whim that I wanted to work there, that I really legitimately wanted to work there. I was willing to do whatever it took to work there. So that was the point of filling out the application. I already knew they had one on hand, but it was just the fact that I was willing to drive across town and take the time to do it, you know. And so I filled out the application, turned it in. This probably went on for 6 to 8 weeks. And I don't remember exactly at what point, but you know, I remember distinctly one of the times I went in there, the owner, he kind of had a bushy hair and his glasses, he'd wear them down on his nose a little bit. He was an older fellow. And you know, so I walk in the door, and here I am, this teenager, and this guy's got tons of experience, you know, all kinds of relationships. So I walk in, and at this point I'm well aware that I probably look foolish at this point, but I've already, you know, committed to this and I'm gonna see it through. So I walk in the door, and he's doing some paperwork, and he kind of like looks up from his glasses and he sees me and doesn't say anything. You know, he stares at me and I stare at him. He looked at me in the eye, and he kind of put his paper down for a little bit. And he said, be here at 8 o'clock Monday morning and don't be late. So I said, yes, sir, turned around, walked away. And I came in Monday and started working there. And I worked there for a long time. When I started, I would just do whatever they let me do. You know, I ended up, when I left there years later, I was the lead technician there. You know, that place definitely laid the groundwork for the rest of my career in the automotive field. Number one, I absolutely love working there. It wasn't even like a job, you know, so I was extremely happy there. And I was a very detail-oriented person. I was very particular. I like doing things very neat and organized, and that was basically the only thing that was acceptable there. That really worked good for my particular personality. You know, we were only allowed to use OEM parts. And you know, they taught me a lot. They showed me, they would take apart aftermarket parts and they show, you know, why they weren't the same quality, and you know, all kinds of stuff. You know, so I learned an incredible amount. And the owner there, the same one that hired me that day, he put me back in the back of the shop with a guy who was probably early to mid 30s at that point. Still to this day, his name was Gary Cleaver. I still talk to him all the time, and to this day, he was definitely one of the best mechanics that I've ever met. The guy would, you know, chain smoke cigarettes and walk around, and he could fix anything. I always had like a lot of respect for him and looked up to him. And you know, to me, I was like, how do you figure all this stuff out? What was really important about this is the owner asked me to train under him. You know, so he would pay Gary extra for time that he spent teaching me. I think because I showed so much initiative in the beginning that the owner felt like it was worth it to pay this technician for his time for teaching me, because he thought that would be a good investment. So I honestly believe my effort in the beginning is what facilitated that. And now that I own a business and I hire younger guys, I believe that 100%. I was able to learn an incredible amount in a relatively short amount of time, because this guy had years of experience. His dad was a technician. Me and him got along. He was like my second dad almost. He was like my work dad. And he went out of his way to take care of me and teach me. And so that really gave me a huge head start at a very young age. And like I said, I still talk to this guy today. He means the world to me. He really got me started in the right direction. That was the foundation for where I started this. That shop basically, that changed the course of my life all the way up until this point. The shop was dedicated to quality, quality parts. They basically catered to car enthusiasts. These guys like loved their cars, and they would take extremely good care of the cars. And I fell in love with that atmosphere. I fell in love with that idea. Not everything they did was 100%, but that even helped me, because I looked at stuff and I looked at things that probably could have been done better, and I looked at stuff that they had done that worked really well. So it kind of gave me a very good grasp on things that worked and things that, you know, could probably have been done better. And I knew at that point that I wanted to own my own shop. I wanted to create basically a place like that that was, even cater to even higher end cars. During my younger years, I had always been infatuated with like Lamborghini and Ferrari, Lamborghini specifically. The clientele that would come into this place, they had Corvettes and classic cars and whatnot, and so these people also had other cars. And I mentioned earlier I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and there's no exotic car dealers. There's hardly any exotic cars really in Louisville. There's, you know, a select few. So a lot of these guys that would come in had these cars, had Ferraris and Lamborghinis. You know, they had to ship them out of state to dealerships, and a lot of them would complain that they felt like they're getting taken advantage of and so on and so forth. So I would get approached when I was younger, and you know, I would build their other cars, and they asked, "Hey, do you think that you can work on this? You think you can fix it?" And I was always the type, like I would dive into whatever. I was never scared to try to fix something. It almost always worked out. Like I was always able to do it. I was always able to figure it out. That's where the exotic car thing started. You know, I started getting higher end cars, and you know, as I fixed them, you know, I was like, okay, well, I can do this, you know, and you know, so I just engulfed myself in learning as much as I possibly could about them. That pretty much started the momentum. You know, when you fix one, you know, they have a friend that has one, so you fix theirs, and you know, 2 turns to 4, 4 turns to 8, so on and so forth. Then they have friends that are the next city over. You know, so then they get shipped in on a truck, and it just kind of grew from that. You know, and then as I went through the years, I worked at various different places. You know, that kind of followed me. So wherever I worked, work on the cars that they had, and then I would always also have basically my own customers that would have, you know, these expensive cars and high-end cars, and I would work on those at this place, kind of like a subcontractor. The place didn't really care because they'd never even seen these cars and they didn't want to work on them, but it kind of looked good in the shop. So that's where the exotic car thing came from. I kind of worked various places. I stayed at this Corvette place until the 2 owners, they basically really didn't see eye to eye on a few things, and the owner that hired me, he, you know, sold out and moved on, and then the other owner, you know, he just ran it a little bit differently, and you know, so I decided, you know, basically I still liked it there, but I was the lead technician. There was really nowhere to advance. In other words, there wasn't anybody else there that knew more than me. You need somebody that's smarter than you and knows more than you to be able to learn from. You know, so I kind of felt like I was stagnant, and I didn't want to do that. At that point, I felt like it was crucial for my career long term I need to leave my comfort zone. And this is really important, and I'm going to talk to you all about this later on, probably in a different video, especially, you know, to you younger guys, and I talk to the guys here about this all the time. But I had to get out of my comfort zone, because when you're comfortable, you're not growing. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it's cars or anything else that pertains to everything in life. I started going to different places where I felt out of my comfort zone. Yeah, I'm not gonna go through every place I ever worked, but you know, I went to dealerships, and I went to 4-wheel drive shops where I was fabricating suspension, anything that was different. And you know, so I kind of, you know, I would go someplace and I would learn everything I could, and then I would go to another place, and so on and so forth. 2012, I was probably early 30s, okay? I got a call from a guy who was a tuner. He was working at a performance shop, and he needed a guy that was a good technician, okay? He didn't really he had some parts changers, but they were having problems with some cars, didn't have anybody that could diagnose stuff. And he contacted me about working there. And at this point in time, I didn't really know that much about tuning cars. I had a basic concept, but it's not like I was a tuner or anything like that. So that would have been something that at the time was a little bit different. And so I'm like, okay, you know, I could probably learn some stuff here that I don't know, or that I don't know as well. So that part of it enticed me. You know, so I talked to him a few times, and I ended up, you know, agreeing to work there. And basically, he was the tuner. He was kind of running the place, and there was a silent partner. He was a very wealthy guy, and you know, nothing to do with cars. This was just a business he was involved in. And I worked there a very short amount of time. I probably worked there 2 weeks. And during that 2 weeks, it was discovered that the tuner was stealing money under the table. So the owner, the silent partner, caught him changing paperwork or something along those lines. And so obviously he was terminated. The owner of the place, the silent partner, you know, he asked me if I could run it. And at this time I'd never ran a business before. I said yes, you know, because I figured I could figure it out. And so that kind of threw me right there head first, you know, and I'm like, I have to run this place, which wasn't a big deal. I had done things kind of on par with that, where I, you know, if I'd worked at a place, I kind of gravitated toward the top. But I wasn't a tuner, and I did not feel confident tuning people's cars. So I had to figure this out. So at first I would hire a reputable tuner to come in and tune the customers' cars that were there. I started learning everything I could about tuning cars out of necessity, obviously. At this point, I probably ran this place for about a year and a half. So let me tell you a few things about this. This was a very eye-opening experience on a few different levels. Number one, the guy that owned the business was a very wealthy, successful man. He was self-made, he started with nothing, and it had nothing to do with car-related stuff. But I formed a friendship with this guy, and much more than this business partner or whatever, and he kind of, maybe not knowingly, but he had a huge impact on my life, because he was the first person that I'd ever met personally, like on a friendship level, that was very wealthy and very successful and had come from nothing. And so it's kind of like proof right there in front of your face that, you know, you can start from nothing, you can make it. You know, he didn't get lucky, he made his own luck. So that part, that made a huge impact on my life. And listening to him and him teaching me things, yeah, I would basically, you know, listen, you know, very close to anything he would tell me, any advice. And, you know, so that had a big impact on my life. Number two, at this point and during this business, he had already lost an incredible amount of money, obviously, because this guy was stealing from him. And he was fed up with this little business venture. He had multiple other businesses making a lot of money. So this was just kind of like a thorn in his side at this point. So the owner, he didn't want to, you know, lose any more money in this business. So he's, you know, he basically said, hey, I'm going to put this much money into it, and past this is it, you know. And if you get tired of it or stressed out or don't want to mess with it, you got a job. I ran a business for about a year like this, and when there was no money, I just didn't pay myself. So this gave me a real world experience of what it's like running your own business. After about a year of this and cleaning up messes and doing all this, I got to the point, and I debated this earlier, whether I should just shut this down and then start up my own thing. In hindsight, I probably should have done that, you know, because I spent a lot of effort trying to clean up this guy's mess under that old name. Basically, at one point, you know, I went to the guy who owned the business and also owned the building, and just told him, I was like, you know, I feel like I'm working so hard to try to clean this mess up that somebody else made, and I'm really worried about my name and my reputation being tarnished by this other guy's shenanigans, you know. And he understood completely. So basically worked out a deal where he leased me the building. We left the other business, you know, we shut that down, and I started my own business, which is Forza. So this would have been January of 2014. So the name came from the name Forza. I had obviously been doing exotic cars for a long time, you know, mostly Ferrari and Lamborghini. So I wanted to come up with some kind of cool name. And so I remember what I did is, you know, I got a notebook paper, and I wrote down a bunch of terms like Cobra, Viper, Black Widow, anything I could think of that was kind of cool. Something like Performance Shop, Aggressive. And since I had done you know, Italian cars for so long, what I did is I started going down the list and take, you know, Google Translate, and I started translating these various words into Italian. Some of them you couldn't pronounce, or some of them were, you know, didn't sound like they were spelled or spelled like they sounded. And, you know, so I got to several words on the list, like strength, power, force, and those all translated to Forza. So I'd never heard of that word at the time, and, you know, so okay, Forza. Apparently, it's a more common term than I knew, but I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, so not a lot of Italian there. And, you know, so Forza sounded exactly like it's spelled, and it's very easy to spell. It's 2 syllables, and I liked it. So I came up with Forza Tuning and Performance. So that's where the name came from. A lot of people ask that. And so Forza started in January 2014. I operated that business for, let's see, through 14, 15, and then through 2016. And at that point, I knew I was going to relocate the business, and I've always wanted to live at the beach, and I never liked wintertime. Over 85% of my business, the first location, cars were shipped in from out of state. Louisville is not exactly a hotbed for performance cars. There's a few shops there, there are holes in the wall, they struggle to make it, and because there's not a lot of cars there. So I would come down to Florida and I would study car count demographics, and I would do car shows down here, and I got a really good feel for the different areas. And so I picked Tampa Bay. I had been to Clearwater and I'd been to Tampa before, and I loved it. It was kind of felt like home to me, you know, which was important to me. And you know, so after about a year and a half of searching around, I found the building that I'm currently in now. So we relocated down here mid 2017. Our first day technically open was August 1st, 2017 in Florida. Granted, the shop was not ready to work on cars. It was just an empty shell. And you know, so we're working day and night trying to get it up and ready. And you know, so I remember 30 days after we got the keys and the electricians were wiring up the last lift, and then we get word that Hurricane Irma's coming through. And I'm like, holy shit, you know, I'm not used to what's involved with a hurricane or anything like that. So, you know, I asked some of the local people, you know, do I need to take this serious? Do I need to evacuate? No. And they're like, yes, you need to evacuate. This could be very serious. So, you know, I'm here for a month. We don't really even have any cars. Here I am packing stuff up. I find out that the insurance policy that my insurance agent up north had wrote for me in Florida, I had no coverage for storm with a name. Obviously, you know, I feel like I'm going to throw up at this point because obviously Hurricane Irma, hurricanes have names. My insurance agent was from up north where, you know, we don't have storms with names. I'd paid for 4 months up front, non-refundable, you know, so I'm like, God, if this hurricane comes through and wipes everything out, I'm done, this is it. Luckily, that didn't happen. You know, I came back down and got 4 more months worth of insurance through a different provider. So there's a lot of setbacks in the beginning. There's a lot of things that happen that you don't foresee and that almost you can't foresee. And that's not just with me or just this car shop, that's with a lot of things in life. Fast forward to current day, we're doing very well. We have a lot of really great customers, a lot of local customers, still a lot of out-of-state customers. We stay very busy. I have an incredible crew here, you know, so I feel very fortunate. You know, it's been a long road to get here. You know, I think that's important to mention because there's a lot of people that have this idea that owning your own business is going to be easy, or it's going to be easier than working for somebody else. And you know, I hear people say, you know, oh, it must be nice working for yourself. You can do whatever you want whenever you want to, okay? And that's the furthest thing from the truth. You know, when you work for somebody, you have one boss. When you own your own business, I have more bosses than anybody else. Every single person that has a car here or that calls me about a car, they're my boss. I'm working for them. I have to basically take their idea or take their dream and put it all together and make it work. And every single person wants their car to be the focus of attention. So you have to basically give them that, but do that through a multitude of different people. So owning your own business is definitely not easy, not easier than working for a place. It definitely is stressful. You definitely do not get to do whatever you want whenever you want to do it, unless that means working incessantly. You get to do that all the time. But it's what I love to do. I love building cars. I love the atmosphere, and I love having a group of people here that's a very family-oriented atmosphere. Basically, what I've tried to recreate is the same environment and scenario that I started with years ago at the Corvette Specialty Shop. And it's very, very similar. And that's how much of an impact that place had on me. And basically we have that here. You all see the videos and you see people having fun. That's not staged for the video. The video guys are in here just randomly filming stuff that happens on a day-to-day basis. Yes, we take our work very, very seriously here. There is a very strict standard that you have to uphold here. The shop is not staged for videos. It's not clean for videos. The shop is literally that clean all the time. It has to be. But at the same time, we try to have fun here. We try to keep it a very family-oriented atmosphere, and it's a very good balance. I think it's a very unique atmosphere. I get that a lot. People come in here, I've never worked for a place that's like this, and that makes me feel proud because, you know, now I've created what I once loved at another place. And, you know, so a lot of times that in and of itself makes it worth it to me. That's a little bit about me, and you know, if it's long-winded, sorry, you can fast forward or not listen, whatever. But for the people that request it, you know, that's basically my story. If you have any specific questions, you leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to expand on any, you know, any significant part of it or whatnot. I don't want to bore you with endless details. And then I will get into different aspects of the questions you all ask, as far as like for the younger guys that are trying to get into this and wanting advice or tips or anything like that. I'd be more than happy to give them to you all, but I'll do it in a separate video. That way it's not so long-winded, and the people that don't necessarily really care about that, you know, have to listen to it all in one video. So I hope you like this, you know, but this is my little story. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate all the support. Y'all have been great. So if you like this video, make sure you like the channel and subscribe. Thanks, guys.